I met Dov, I find this hard to believe, 17 years ago, right after he founded LRN, and since then he has grown this company to 500 corporate clients, and he helps those companies, including, 20 million employees, I think, at last count, develop ethical corporate cultures and inspire principled performance in business. Now, he enters this fray, and I want you to get your heads around this, with some serious intellectual capital. He graduated summa cum laude with a bachelor's and master's in philosophy from UCLA, and he later earned a BA with honors in philosophy, politics, and economics from Oxford University, which he attended, he told me right before I went up here, with Senator Sarbanes' son, which is a bit of serendipity. So, okay, he also, by the way, with all these, this litany of honors, it's hard to remember, he also graduated with honors from Harvard Law School. Okay, so that's really impressive, but that's not, for me, the big point about Dov. The big point about Dov is that he's a moral philosopher who has put these high-minded thoughts to the practical test in the rough and tumble world. He's written for Corporate Responsibility magazine. A number of you read his work earlier this year, and put out essentially an argument about the ROI for corporate responsibility as tested by a third-party source. So what we are dealing with is the rough equivalent of what we're all been talking about in the library, which is about third-party verification. This is not some slick PR campaign. This has been tested out in the practical world. The How philosophy is prominently featured as one of the 9 rules for companies to embrace in Thomas Friedman's seminal book, The World is Flat. And when you hear Dov explain this approach, I think you'll know why. It's very simple. He has a very simple core value. It's truth. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me in welcoming Dov Seidman.
Thank you, Dirk. Those were warm and kind and inspiring and heartening words. Let me see if I can just get my first slide up here. There we go. Enjoy your lunch. It's a pleasure to be with you. And I just want to emote a feeling that I just have a tremendous amount of respect and admiration for who you are, but the journey you've been on, more than that, and how much you've achieved in a few short years by taking the issue central to our lives, deep to my heart, and making it the center, or trying to, of business. But we need to push more to the center. I feel that I'm going to preach to the choir, so I want to acknowledge that we are kindred spirits. At least I feel that way. I feel that we've been climbing the same mountain, the mountain that there's more to business than just business. At the top of the mountain awaits us principles or responsibility. Yet we've been climbing the mountain on different routes, and now I've come to think that the world is fusing, and therefore our routes will merge with that. I come here for lunch all the way from uptown, from Midtown. So I thought what I would do is bring with me just one idea. For the next 50 minutes, and then we'll engage a little bit in some question and answer, I literally have come from Midtown to downtown with just one idea. No matter what I say for the next 50 minutes, think that I'm just trying to share and argue for and demonstrate and prove one idea. And if on the merits this idea makes any sense to you, I'm then going to ask you to do one thing with it, okay? That's it. Let me first illustrate this one idea with 2 stories. How many of you have flown Southwest Airlines? Many of you. Not too long ago, I landed in Las Vegas on a Southwest Airlines flight. As the plane came to the gate, the flight attendant with elan and passion came through the loudspeaker and said, "Listen, dear customers of Southwest Airlines, we've done research, and it turns out that before you deplane, if you would simply turn around and cross your seatbelts one over the other, you will have good luck at the gambling tables." Now, we laughed the way you did, but then we did it. Now, there is a federal regulation, a safety regulation, that seatbelts need to be crossed before the next plane can take off. Through how she reached out and connected with us, she got us to help her company comply with a safety regulation. It also turns out that Southwest Airlines turns their planes around 6 minutes faster than their nearest rival, How many minutes would it have taken her to go up and down the aisle by herself and cross the seatbelts? Let me hear it. 6 minutes. Through how she connected with us, she got us to help her airline not just comply with the regulation, but achieve a competitive advantage, an operational one. They also make a promise to the marketplace: home on time, no frills, fun, and safe. And there was something organic and authentic in how she connected with us, and I felt she gets out of bed to keep that promise through how she behaves and relates. There is no manual or policy in Southwest Airlines that tells her that she must tell the gambling joke when she arrives in Las Vegas. She might innovate when she flies to Los Angeles and swap out gambling for celebrity sightings. And she does not get paid extra for doing that. She operates in a culture full of trust, where she is inspired to contribute not just her moral character, but her creativity to make a difference. Let's move to Michigan. The University of Michigan Health Systems. You're from Michigan, is that why you're clapping? Your dad works there. Well, tell me if this is true, because I'm inspired, because I'm pretty sure it is. I've researched this deeply. The University of Michigan was facing a crisis, like many other healthcare providers. They were being sued increasingly for medical malpractice. The doctors who led this great institution got in a room and they said, "What business are we in? We are in the responsibility business, because you cannot provide health and healthcare if you don't do so responsibly. What is the first thing you do when you injure a patient? You try to reconnect by simply saying you're sorry." What do you think the lawyer said to them? Absolutely not. We have more money. We can fight these people. An apology is an admission of guilt. We can't. It'll be held against us in the court of law. They had this internal debate and battle, and the doctors won, and they started to authentically apologize. They had another value called truth, so they did not say they're sorry when they were right, because they didn't want to be Machiavellian about it. Let's just say we're sorry to have an effect. Let's say it when we mean it. Their lawsuits went down by 50%, as did their payouts. Then they started to speak more transparently back on the home front, and they said, here are other things we can fix, and they were able to improve the provision of healthcare services. They made a wave where now 37 states, because other hospitals started to emulate them, 37 other United States have passed legislation that apologies cannot be held against you in the court of law. Let me ask you a question. Would the world be a better, more responsible place if more flight attendants or employees behaved and related the way the Southwest Airlines individual did, and if more leaders were animated by core values and how they did the right thing? World a better place? Yes? Can I hear it? Okay. That's why we're kindred spirits. I have some bad news for you. You might share in the bad news. Those behaviors are more the exception than the rule. There are many ways to make this point. You see it every day. But 7 out of 10 employees, if it's Gallup, Towers Perrin, you pick, are disengaged. We have a jobs crisis in this country and in the world, and it pains us. I think we have a deeper crisis. We not only have a jobs crisis, we have a careers crisis, because 7 out of 10 people do not fly out of bed and contribute their character and creativity and passion and energy, and thereby they're not innovating and growing and creating those jobs for brothers and sisters and cousins and uncles and friends. 2 out of those 7 employees are sabotaging their company. They're engaged in sabotage. How can we make the world a better place? How can you take people on a journey with you to a more responsible world if 7 out of 10 people don't even care about making a difference at the company they work at? That's a crisis. That's leadership malpractice. Now, I know what you're thinking. I know what you're thinking. We have such robust corporate responsibility programs, right? Our people are more engaged. Let me tell you about a company that was winning these awards for corporate social responsibility. I won't mention names. That has incredible employee engagement scores. So much so that they had a policy that their employees could recommend to the company a friend or a cousin, and they would hire them. And for many years, they were watching that score go up and up. Wow, people must love it here. They're recommending their friends to the company. And one day, not too long ago, a senior executive was speaking to a middle manager and in passing says to him, hey, when your brother finishes business school, you're going to recommend him to this company, right? You know what this person said? Excuse my French? Hell no. My brother can get a job anywhere. But I have a cousin that no one would ever hire. I'm going to recommend him. Do you see why we need to get deep underneath these metrics? Their engagement scores were going up. People were recommending people to the company, but the wrong people because they disengaged from the values and what the mission of the company was all about. Why have we disconnected? Why have we disconnected? Well, we once had a management guru. His name was Adam Smith. Now, in this part of the world, Wall Street, and in most of the world of business, most people think that Adam Smith was an economist. He wrote The Wealth of Nations, after all. How many of you thought that Adam Smith was an economist? Raise your hand if you think he was an economist. Ladies and gentlemen, he was the chairman of the moral philosophy department at Glasgow University when he wrote The Wealth of Nations. Capitalism for him was not about a system where people do what they will do, what can do or can't do, but what they should do. And we know that should is about responsibility. It was always about truly mutual interactions and competitive interactions. It was a theory of morality at scale manifested through markets. And yet we chose to interpret it as something more laissez-faire, zero-sum economic theory. Why? Because we fell in love with a different management guru, Don Vito Corleone. You laugh. How many of you have been to a funeral where you heard that he was a jerk at work but a loving husband? And a ruthless negotiator but a caring father? Have you heard that? And we were at eulogies and we didn't think all that badly of that person, right? Because the most famous line in The Godfather is, it's not personal, it's just business. Now, logically, it follows that if we can create a separate sphere, just business, if Washington is just politics, if what happens in a Penn State locker room is just football, but not life, it's just football, and if business is just business, if we can create a separate sphere, then greed is good, too big to fail, bosses telling people, just get it done, I don't care how you get it done, I don't care about being responsible or not, just do it, is actually a rational strategy that can be scaled. However, if you feel that you can't maintain this because, and you know this better than anybody, if you think that the world is fusing, has become interconnected, and you can no longer maintain a separate sphere, then something interesting happens. David Hume, the Scottish philosopher, returns, who said to us that the moral imagination diminishes with distance. If in an interconnected world there is no distance, then we need to reawaken and bring morality back in because there is no separate sphere. Everything, and with Facebook, with 1 billion citizens in the country called Facebook, everything is now personal. Just ask our children who have completely fused their lives and do not want to go to funerals, and if they hear those kinds of eulogies, will not respect that person. Fair enough? Now, if everything is personal, and therefore in personal relationships we know it's about being responsible, then it's time to not just use impersonal language. The world has gone from connected to interconnected to morally interdependent. There is a saying that the opposite of love is not necessarily hate, but indifference. A corollary is that the opposite of morality is not necessarily immorality, but amorality. The opposite of responsibility might not be irresponsibility, it might just be no responsibility. So I believe that we are rising and falling together because one banker at his desk can lose $2 billion for his bank at his desk, wipe out bonuses and compensation for his colleagues, and introduce risk into the global marketplaces from his desk. One vegetable vendor in Tunisia and a few friends with cell phone cameras can, as he did, spark a revolution towards freedom throughout the entire Middle East. I believe that we have entered the era of behavior, and even this has encroached and penetrated the corporate fortress. Did you ever think you would see the day that on the cover of Forbes it would say, "Welcome to the corporate social revolution"? Why is this happening in this interconnected world? How many of you know about Netflix or use Netflix? Many hands went up. Netflix was riding pretty high. Many of you were its customers. They were adding all these subscribers. They were feeling so invincible that they passed a little price increase. And within 24 hours, 800,000 subscribers in unison, collectively, bolted and crashed their stock. When was the last time you saw 800,000 people collectively do something so unified? That's the world we're in. Bank of America tried to charge $5 for a debit card. The same thing happened. You want to hear a most inspiring story of responsible conduct? This is Martha Payne. She's 9 years old. She lives in Scotland. She didn't think her school was serving her responsibly nutritious food. She started taking pictures about it, blogging about it, 9 years old. Soon, 1 million page views on her blog about the food in her school with pictures. The school got together and banned her blog. More users came online. They reversed their decision. Now they're serving better food, and if they serve salad, it could be unlimited eating of the salad, but limited eating of the non-salad. Reminds you of what's going on with sodas in this town, right? And she got so popular that this blog raised $10,000 to take food to Malawi. 9 years old. That's the world we are in. Soon she's going to be working at a company making similar waves in the corporate platform. So ladies and gentlemen, I want to stand right here and make a proclamation. I believe that we just have not entered, we are now way deep in the era of behavior. That's what you're about. Responsible behavior. There's no better way to manifest and personify responsibility and the ethic of responsibility than through corporate leadership and individual behavior. Now, I know that behavior has always mattered. It mattered in villages. I hereby say that it matters more than ever, and in ways it never has before, as we've just described. Why? If you don't think we're in a new era, then let's keep trying to reset, reboot, and reform the system. You've heard those words a lot: reset, reboot, and reform, right? But if you're in a new era, we have to have the courage to do what Einstein implored us to do. Whenever you think you're in a new era, you must rethink your assumptions about everything you thought before. Will you raise your hand if you think that the world has been reshaped, that it's fair to not reform our system, but to rethink it? Raise your hand if you're a reformist. And raise your hand if you're rethinkist. So many more rethinkists in the room. So I am now going to engage you around rethinking. If we're in the era of behavior, and behavior has always mattered, behavior is not new, but we need to rethink, what's the first thing we should rethink? Why don't we rethink behavior itself? Let's rethink behavior. How have we been treated around behavior? When do we tell a child to behave? Right after the child misbehaves. When do we talk about good, responsible behavior? He was let out of prison early for good behavior. We've learned that there's something quite defensive. You know, over the years, I've been at this for 20 years, and I've met many CEOs who want to win in the world. And they said, Dov, this is really important stuff. Can you speak to my general counsel? Can you speak to my chief risk officer, my chief responsibility officer? Because behavior has been associated with goalkeeping. Everybody wants a world-class goalie. Everybody wants to prevent the violation of child labor laws and too many CO2 emissions, compliance failures, ethical breaches. Everybody wants the greatest prevention department. So everybody wants a world-class goalie, but few operating line item executives want to play goalie, right? They like scoring goals. They like being on offense, growth, marketing, sales. But in the era of behavior, the goalies are saying there are too many shots on goal. What do we need to do to keep the ball on offense? And in the transparent, interconnected, morally interdependent world, how all 11 players, and i.e. everybody, plays the game, collaborates, connects, behaves, engenders trust, deepens loyalty, keeps promises, etc., is now the source of competitive advantage. To make this logically true, would you agree with me that if the only reason someone works at your respective companies is what they're paid, they should leave if someone pays them more? That follows logically, right? Yes? If the only reason someone buys from you is price, then they should switch loyalties if your price is undercut, right? Well, in the past, we could hang on to employees or customers by capturing them. They had no place to go. But in this fused, interconnected world where people can come and go the way they did with Netflix, everybody is in search of deeper glue to hang on to people. And how we treat them and connect with them, and how responsibly we engender trust with them and deepen relationships with them is the new source of competitive advantage. So in the era of behavior, behavior doesn't just matter, it has become the source of competitive advantage, and more CEOs are saying, I'd like to keep the conversation and not just send you to the general counsel, for example. How many of you have used a suitcase lately where you roll it with wheels? How many of you just carry your suitcases? Most people buy suitcases, right, that have wheels on it, right? When suitcases with wheels were introduced, people objected. They said only flight attendants would be caught dead with wheels on their suitcases. Real people carry their suitcases, okay? That was a 7-year battle until now all suitcases have wheels. But what did they do? What did Toomey, for example, do? They shifted our behavior from carrying suitcases to wheeling suitcases. When you put a product on sale, what are you doing? You're shifting behavior. Buy now, buy later. When you put 2 bins, one recycling and one a regular bin, you're shifting behavior. Throw this over there and that over there. The entire society is designed. Look, we're in an election right now. This is the only political statement I'm going to make, but each side is going to spend about $1 billion trying to shift a tiny sliver of swing state voters from this camp to that, as opposed to elevating and taking us all on a national journey that's daring and that's the best of who we are as a country, given our legacy and tradition. We are amazing at shifting behavior, now, not later, here to there. What business are you in? What business have I been in? We're in the business not of shifting behavior, but of elevating behavior. To be responsible is to be elevated. To collaborate with people from different cultures is a form of elevated behavior. Innovation, creativity, how the doctors behaved. So we are asking for elevated behavior, but the techniques and mechanisms that we have scaled, that we keep bringing to this, carrots and sticks applied against policies and rules, and participation in programs, however inspiring, it's about shifting when we want to elevate. So behavior is now the source of competitive advantage. It's gone on offense. We must think and rethink to not just shift from here to there, but to elevate it. Companies are getting this. Chevron is the human energy company. Cisco is the human network. Deere is human flourishing. Dow is the human element. Ally Bank says, we speak human. Later today, the CEO of Manpower will be here, Jeff Joris, who I respect greatly. Manpower has declared that we're in the human age. What does that mean? Companies always go, in the words of Wayne Gretzky, to where the puck is going. They always assert and proclaim things. And instead of saying, we're excellent, we're inexpensive, we're this or that, the assertion has shifted to humanity. Let's have a relationship in a new sphere, in a new dimension, the human sphere. Connect with us because of who we are. And you're probably thinking it's one thing to proclaim your humanity. It's another thing to translate it right into corporate practices, protocols, leadership, and individual behavior that is human. It's one thing to have humanity. It's another thing to put it at the center and be sure it animates you, right? Here is the most painful example between asserting humanity and having it deeply. Not too long ago, I looked out my window, as many New Yorkers did, but now the whole country has been seeing photos and has been looking up into the great skies. There's probably no more iconic and treasured U.S. program than NASA and the space program. But we just retired our shuttle. In 1986, when Columbia tragically blew up, we went into NASA. We couldn't believe this happened. And we investigated and we said, how could this happen? So we looked through our traditional lens of shifting Do they have enough controls, policies, methods, checks and balances? How strong was their CSR program? How strong was their GRC program, governance, risk, and compliance? And we found that it was infirm, had holes, things were missing. So what did we do? We strengthened NASA. We created a perfect organization from a governance, risk, compliance, social responsibility, organizational responsibility, etc. But then, in 2003, Columbia tragically blew up. We said, how could this happen? So we went into NASA. And lo and behold, we discovered that indeed NASA had become pretty perfect from an organizational compliance, governance, and responsibility standpoint. However, we also learned that more deeply, junior employees felt that there was too much arrogance in the culture. Why come forward if I'm a peon and tell this senior person that if a little sponge breaks away from the wing, it could bring down this great shuttle? Senior people don't listen to little people. Other people said, why come forward? There's too much fear here. I will be punished if I come forward. The human infrastructure was not strong enough to overcome the programmatic infrastructure. The culture wasn't elevated enough. Now, anything worth doing in business or in organizational life gets scaled, right? CRM, ERP, HRIS, right? TQM, right? GRC and CSR. If it's worth doing, we create a function, programs for it, a system for it, and we do it with great rigor. And I congratulated you, because we're kindred spirits right at the gate, that you've done this with great rigor. You have great programs. They've made a tremendous difference. And the greatest difference is they've put the most important topic on the map, and much good is now happening in the world because you have stormed, you've done your own revolution, the fortress has been cracked, and the idea that it's just business is crumbling. However, this is a time for us to stop and be honest and say, are we really climbing as far up the mountain as we hope to be at this point? Why then are 7 employees still disengaged? So I say to you the following: let's not do CSR, because I learned that when someone goes offshore to money launder, they might have learned in the compliance program why not to do it onshore. So they go offshore to do it nonetheless. Why don't we create a culture where they wouldn't think to behave that way wherever they are? Instead of doing CSR, let's get responsible behavior as an outcome of a culture that's about humanity. And let's hold leadership accountable through our example of leadership to leading from that human foundation. So, I've talked about scaling. Have you heard this expression that what you measure is what you get, right? You can't scale anything without metrics, correct? Can't scale without measurement. Fair enough? With Senator Sarbanes here, right? It's an honor to be in the same room with you. We've measured Sarbanes 402, right? 404, 302. How many signatures are we getting? You did so much good to take an issue that behavior matters and say, here it is. Never again are we going to watch the too big to fail happen the way it did with Enron. Yet we still get too big to fail. And here's why. So I thank you so much, given what I've spent my entire life devoted to making this issue of how we behave so central. But it must be acknowledged that what we measure is a choice. What we measure is a window into what we value and into our values. And if a friend came to you and said, I'm in trouble, help me, I need $10,000, would you say, 10? How about I give you 8? Or would you say, how are you living? How did you get in this rut? And how can I help you move forward? Would you have a how much conversation, 10 versus 8, or a how conversation? A is how much. Raise your hand if you're in the how much category. Raise your hand if you're in the B category. It's about how. Personal relationships are about responsibility. How did you learn to behave irresponsibly? How can I help you become more responsible? Look at what we're up against. Not too long ago, the CEO of Bloomberg said the following: we know that good companies tend to perform better, but until there's proof, I don't think we're going to see any much interest from investors. Wow, we're still at this point. So here's my next idea. Why don't we rethink measurement itself? We spent 2 years debating how much, in other words, how big should the stimulus package be? 800 billion, a trillion, $1.2 trillion? Not how are we going to stimulate the economy. How much GDP? How much resource? How much responsibility? Right? Look at your world. How much energy use, workforce injuries, emissions? Anytime we scale something, we adopt a how much metric. In the new economy, it's how many friends, how many followers, how many page views. It's probably hard to think of anything that has reached scale in terms of measurement that is not how much, because it's easily quantifiable. We all know how to count, even though we know that responsible life is not about how much, as you said, but about how. What if we could measure how we behave, how organizations operate, how they relate to community, how they contribute to society? Do you think that our respective, and I hope mutual, and fusing agendas would scale better and faster if we can measure the how? Yes? Fair? Let me hear if it's worthwhile. Thank you. Well, as Dirk said, I went to the USC Center for Effective Organizations. Boston Research Group, they founded the RAND Center for Behavior Economics and RDT, and I took our proprietary way of measuring the how, and I said, the value of truth says, take this and tell me if it's accurate. We went to 18 countries, 36,000 employees, 2 million observations of behavior. What do they have permission to do and not to do? What do they do and not to do? What do their bosses do with them and to them? We looked at everything. And I've got some good news and bad news for you. What we discovered is that organizations fall into 3 archetypes. Blind obedience. Yes, they are what it sounds like. Command and control, more sticks compared to the carrots, do it my way or the highway, many rules, many policies. It's about survival, pretty short-term thinking, and these hierarchies are not only tall, but they're rigid. The next organization is what I call informed acquiescence. That's the most popular organization. People are informed as to the laws of the land, regulations and policies and what's expected of them. They're informed as to how hard they should work and if they do A, B, and C, when the next promotion is going to come. More carrots as compared to the sticks. Leadership is still command and control. Lots of rules. And the third and most elevated organization that we found is what I call values-based self-governance. People do the right thing because not to do the right thing is no longer a failure to comply, but a betrayal of one's own self because they have those values. Leadership is more connecting and collaborating. Values aren't just expressed, they actually animate decision-making. And the organization is not on the quarterly system necessarily. It must deal with it and confront it, but it really is thinking long-term because it's pursuing a purpose-inspired mission and not just a conventional notion of success. Here's the good news. I'm going to start with the bad news. Get it out of the way. The bad news is that only 3% of organizations are in the values-based self-governing cultures. Do you understand how bad this is for us? Only 3% of organizations can truly operate responsibly as opposed to have a corporate responsibility investment or program. What an opportunity to go on a journey. Imagine that. These are the numbers. 43% are still blindly obedient. That's the bad news. 18 countries. Here's the good news. If you could become one of those organizations in terms of almost every how much metric that you want, you either get less of it or more of it based on what you want. We all want less misconduct. You get much less misconduct if you could become that. We've tested this. We've gone into divisions, and here we just pay expenses. And here we pay expenses only when 2 signatures from 2 superiors are achieved. We get more compliance with the expense policy when we just pay than with the 2 signatures. Because here, if you betray trust in a system of trust, you will publicly get fired, and here you just lost out in the cat and mouse game. We're testing these things. So you get less misconduct, you get more innovation, more satisfied customers, employee loyalty, adoption of new ideas, a better reputation. People are more engaged, and therefore they recommend you to their company, and financial performance. If you could become truly human at scale. One barrier standing in our way is a massive disconnect between CEOs and everybody else, those running the place and those who are charged with truly how the work gets done. Most CEOs are 3 up to 8 times more likely to observe that they are already arrived self-governing than reality. Now, I am not saying, because I'm a CEO too, that our heads are in the wrong place. This is structural. How many of you have told a subordinate, I trust you, go innovate, I trust you, go do something to increase the responsibility with which we relate to community. Go for it, I believe in you. How many of you have said that to somebody? What if they leave you and they need to get 2 signatures to get $12 to go do that thing? What do they think of you? What a hypocrite. You told me to go do it, but you work in an environment where I got to get a signature to spend $12. This is a structural problem. We have scaled up some schizophrenia among the governance, the rules, the policies, the controls, the culture, the values and principles, and how things really happen around this place, and leadership. Is it connect and collaborate or command and control? So if we have a gap in leadership, what's the third and last thing we should rethink? Why don't we rethink leadership itself? Why, after saying that, would I have a picture of Mubarak here? Because Paul Pullman, who stood up when he became the CEO of Unilever and said, no more quarterly guidance. We are really going to take Unilever on a journey. We are going to double revenue, but cut in half our sustainability footprint and make us more environmentally responsible and a more sustainable company, because I have a long-term vision for that. You know what he said to me, given that agenda? We were sitting together not too long ago, and he says, Dov, I have a question for you. It occurred to me that it took them 17 days to get rid of Mubarak. And Mubarak had a military. I don't have tanks at Unilever. What if our consumers or employees don't like how this place is being run and how we behave out in the world? When did you think a CEO would ask such a question as a matter of strategy and operations? That's why I'm so optimistic. We are in an era where we are rethinking fundamentals of leadership itself. We are moving from power over people, do this because my title is bigger than you, do this as a country because I have more aircraft carriers parked in the ocean off your shore, the ability to do this because I have more money than you when capital is all over the world and you want interest from me, do this because I have more land and you want to farm on my land and I'm going to charge you rent to farm on my land, do this because I have more of something relative to you, is giving way in an interdependent world of ideas and not just conspicuous consumption, but conspicuous expression and behavior on blogs and otherwise. Power over people is giving way to power through people. Another way of saying it is formal power. Formal authority is giving way to moral authority. Do this because you trust me. Do this because together we've come to the view that this is the right thing to do. Now, isn't it interesting that sports at international and national levels is all about how much? How fast can you run? How much can you bench press? Each year the offensive lineman in football has to weigh more than the average weight of the offensive line is 310 pounds this year. Next year it'll be 320. This is the ultimate how much environment. Have you noticed that the last 6 winners of the Super Bowl do not scream at their players? The last 6 winners of the U.S. Super Bowl do not scream at their players. Vicente del Bosque won for Spain the Spanish World Cup and the European Cup by being known to be a humanitarian. When Spain lost Game 1 in the World Cup, he asked his players to join him in a room for 20 minutes. He said, "Who are you? What made you champions?" And he left and he said, "Work it out." He didn't scream at them. He didn't make lineup changes, and they went on to win the whole thing. We're seeing this with male and female coaching. Those winning, those demanding peak performers are doing it the quiet way, and they are talking about life outside the field, what makes a champion, what is meaningful. Right here in this town, Tom Coughlin used to put buckets on the field and tell his players that if they don't throw up into the buckets, he will assume they didn't practice enough. Tiki Barber went on television right here locally and said, my coach is a distant dictatorial figure. He was threatened by the owners, if he doesn't win, he's out. You know what he does? He didn't decide to become more controlling. He appointed a leadership council in the locker room of the New York Giants, and he said, me give you the space to do what's right. And he went on a personal transformational journey. The other coaches were up-and-coming coaches. They were never screamers. They learned not to scream from the get-go. He had the courage to transform himself. And they won the Super Bowl against the favorite New England Patriots. His ability to coach was called into question again, and he won the Super Bowl last year again with the same method of human connection. And one CEO after another is now eschewing command and control, and they're saying that. I am now going to connect. Ginny Rometty, IBM CEO, just yesterday at a conference said, don't ask me what my strategy is, ask me what I believe. What do all these leaders who are going on this journey understand as I begin to wrap up? They understand that leadership is about getting people to do things, to go with you on a journey. And there are only 3 ways ever invented to do that. You can coerce people, you can motivate people, or inspire them. Coercion and motivation is carrots and sticks. Carrots and sticks are external stimuli. If you have 8 carrots, you will get 8 parts effort and motivation. And you can use carrots and sticks to shift behavior, and it works. And if you want quasi-robotic, repetitive behavior from employees, show up every Tuesday on an assembly plant and do the same thing over and over and over again, carrots and sticks can achieve that. If you want collaboration, innovation, responsible, principled conduct, which is elevated behavior, the only thing ever invented for that is inspiration, because the first 2 letters in inspiration are in, and inspiration has to come from within, and what is in us, values, beliefs, missions, and purposes worthy of our dedication and commitment, and the job of leadership is to connect with people from within and stay together from within. How many of you want progress towards this more responsible world? Easiest question of the day, right? Have you ever seen progress without innovation? Someone's got to do something better or differently than this Tuesday than last Tuesday. Have you ever seen innovation without some risk-taking? Speaking up in a meeting takes the risk, is risky because someone might think you're a bozo. Spending dollars is a risk. You might not get a return. When do people take risks? When? Who wants to say it? Let me hear it. When do people take risks? What has to be abundant? Who said trust? Please stand up. Bullseye. Trust. Think of this acronym. It's the only acronym I've ever used, called TRIP. Trust leads to risk-taking, which leads to innovation and progress. Now, here's the problem. How many of you want more trust? To have this TRIP. I have just made the decision that I trust you. Let's engage for a second. I trust you. According to Aristotle, who has the virtue of trust? Me for trusting you, or you for being trustworthy? Show of hands if you think Aristotle would say, it's you who are trustworthy where the virtue lies. Show of hands. It's 50-50. Everybody plays. Who thinks it's you for being trustworthy? And who thinks it's me for trusting you? Look at what just happened here. A group of leaders has just split 50-50. Some of you are going to leave this conference and say, I got to go inspect for trust. Trust and verify. Who can we trust? Before we work with that supplier, let's be sure we have systems to figure out if we should. And some of you are going to give trust away. It turns out that trust is a virtue when you give it away. Because when I give you the trust, I've given you the power to do right by me or let me down, but we've been trained to go look for trust. Trust is actually a drug. Neuroscientists have proven that when someone is trusted, oxytocin is released in their brain, and whatever makes them scared of you subsides, and they reciprocate that trust with trust in your direction. I found a donut guy on the streets of Manhattan that was selling donuts. The guy across the street was selling an equally fresh, delicious, equally priced donut. So how does he innovate? Instead of innovating with yet a better donut, he puts a tray of loose change. And he tells his customers, I trust you to pay me and just make your own change. I'm going to stand over here. He started outselling that guy 3-to-1 by innovating in how he related to his customers. The rock band Radiohead trusted their fans to pay what they thought the music was worth, and in that 5th album they made more money than the first 4 albums put together when they put a price on it themselves. And in Indonesia, a country fighting corruption at unprecedented levels, you know what they're now doing? Instead of more police and more controls, they have 10,000 honesty cafes where they're trusting patrons to take food off the shelf and walk to a jar and put money in a jar and make their own change, because they are now fighting this by teaching honesty and probity and not just having better controls against theft in society. Everything I've said, ladies and gentlemen, probably sounds like to really do this at scale is a journey, right? It's a journey. Now in business, we like linearity. Managers don't go to their bosses and say, hey boss, I've come up with a 3-year plan and budget and we're going to be going up and down for a while, right? We expect linearity. Everything's got to be straight up. The definition of a journey is they're curvilinear, they're up and down. They take this form. And they are paradoxical. When I used to grade exams, I used to give A's to the brilliant students who mastered the material they could teach the class themselves. I gave B's to people who did everything right. They were really capable and proficient. But you know who I gave some C's to? There were C's who were really A students who got confused. They had the qualities, they were going for it, but they didn't go all the way yet. But in school, the semester is over and you get a grade, but in life, you get to keep going. I want to acknowledge that we together have been climbing the hill of B. We have compliance programs, responsibility programs, the measurements, the metrics. We've done great. Everybody's winning awards. We have achieved. We've gotten to the mountaintop. I'd like to give us collectively an A for getting a B. And now I say the journey is to climb the hill of A, to truly put humanity and responsible conduct at the center of business so we can have the vision of responsibility that you get out of bed to scale happen from the inside out through the behavior of every single person that makes up the world through their participation in organizational life. The last paradox of journeys is the following. The most ancient paradox in philosophy is this: if you pursue happiness, it eludes you. If you do something other regarding that makes a difference in the lives of somebody else, if you do something that you're passionate about or that fills you with a sense of meaning and purpose, happiness can find you. The corollary to that in business, I believe, is the paradox of success. If you pursue it, it eludes you. If we pursue significance, success can find us. There is no better formulation of the pursuit of significance codified in a one-page morality document than Johnson & Johnson's. We have a responsibility to the doctors and patients and communities of the world. And then at the end, this morality document talks about money. But it says if we live according to these principles, our shareholders should make a fair return, not will. Let's make the world a healthier place and make money, but let's not make the world a healthier place in order to make money. If it's that, we will count how many pills we sell. If it's the former, we will measure how we are contributing to the lives of patients. Here's some more bad news. Even though I've just argued and demonstrated statistically that inspiration is what elevates behavior, that trust is what makes people go on trips, and significance is what really elevates people all the way, only 5% of decisions and actions are truly inspired in corporate life. Trust is at a high level at only 11%, and the pursuit of a true mission is at 30%. We have work to do. Now, let me end where I began. We all said we wanted more of those behaviors that the Southwest Airlines flight attendant and the leaders among the doctors exhibited, right? We want more engagement. These are the 9 engagement indicators that everybody pretty much agrees signify an engaged employee. They do recommend friends to their company, but for the right reasons. They also are engaged if they believe their company invests in the communities where it operates and that their company takes responsibility to the community seriously. Here is what we have statistically proven. Do you see on top where it says trust, values, and mission? When trust, values, and mission moves towards the plus sign, towards the color red, 7 to 9 of those engagement traits miraculously appear. And when trust moves towards the negative sign, they disappear. We've established statistically that nothing engages employees more than trust, values, and mission, not having them, but truly animating life with them. And that's why leaders can go to work, not on CSR, not just on GRC or CRM, or putting an S in front of their business and calling it social. Leaders can go to work to truly shape how governance, culture, and leadership come together in a rethought way to yield a human operating system. And the most important way to do that is to learn the lesson of this one story. You walk up to two bricklayers and you say to them, "What are you doing?" One says, "It's obvious, I'm laying brick." The other says, "It's obvious, I'm building a cathedral." They're doing the same thing, but one has the perspective of significance, a cathedral, and one has the perspective of success. How many bricks do I need to put one on top of the other to keep my job? And the other is, how do I do my job to collaborate with someone else to build a cathedral? So I end with my one idea. We've taken this word how and we've cheapened it. How are you, buddy? How am I going to get from here to there? How's it going? And we count with it. How much, how much, how much? It's an adverb. What if we treated it as a noun? It's the how that makes the difference. Let's get our hows right. Let's put how at the center of business. Let's not have how, but do how. Because if we see it as a how, the leaders will go do it, embed it in the DNA, and they'll scale it. I think we're in the era of behavior. Competitive advantage has shifted from what to how. What matters, but it doesn't win the game. It just keeps us in the game. You can't have a bad product or service, but it used to win. Now it keeps you alive. How is the new source of enduring sustainable advantage, and the best thing about it is inspiration is free, coercion and motivation are really expensive. The most renewable, enduring, abundant, and clean form of energy is human energy, and that's inspired energy. And my last comment is the following. There's one last vestige that we need to kill from the just business era. How many of you have heard that hope is not a strategy? Show me a plan, a linear plan. Hope is not a strategy. When our president, FDR, said, "You have nothing to fear but fear itself," that was a double negative way of saying, don't lose hope. When people lose hope, they despair, they detach. Detaching and disconnecting in a connected world is a terrible strategy. When you are inspired by the value of hope, you lean into the world. You see people in it as collaborators, as friends, and you see potential for great possibility, and you go make it happen. The last thing an inspirational leader does is she or he inspires people with hope, and even though hope is not a strategy, without hope there is no strategy. Ladies and gentlemen, if the idea of how resonates, I ask you to just do one thing. Take that first step, because journeys are about taking that first step. Do whatever makes sense to bring about a how world. Go to your next meeting and don't say, "What's on the agenda? How are we going to connect and collaborate?" Pat somebody in the back for how they got the job done, not just how much they got done. Find a meaningful way to give some trust away and don't just inspect for it, etc., etc. Instead of human innovation, human beings creating a new jigamaji, a new product or new service, let's turn it around and not just do human innovation, but innovation in humanity. Let's innovate in how we behave, relate, lead, govern, and foster culture that makes a difference and is responsible. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share these thoughts.
Stay here for a minute, Dov. I want to thank you very much for taking us on that trip. Folks, it's not a lot of speakers. We all go to these events all the time, right? It's not a lot of speakers who put together Adam Smith with Radiohead. So among other things, I'd like to thank you for that right now. If we have questions, please just raise your hand and I will call on you. I have one or two myself, and then I know Dov has to hit the road. A lot of the folks in this room and at our conference hold the title of Corporate Responsibility Officer or the rough equivalent. Are we making a mistake cognitively by putting that in a separate silo? Can you talk about that?
I don't think you made a mistake for having done it. Somebody needed to get the issue on the map. Somebody needed to build a bridge to the future. Some of the people needed to raise consciousness. Somebody needed to create some new muscle. Somebody needed to create the fusion between businesses and society. All the work that has been done, was enormously important and necessary. And that's why I think we got to the hill of A, the hill of B. The world has changed. I've seen it with compliance. The Defense Industry Initiative, when the government was charging, when contractors were charging the government $500 for toilets,
right.
They went crazy. They did compliance.
Right.
Now, the more compliance we do, the less compliance we get. We needed to start doing compliance. We were ripping the government off, etc. So things get to a point, and then you need to rethink. So I think it would be wrong to now relegate and segregate corporate social responsibility to a program or a function or a silo. If anything, it's about leadership. You're not just practitioners or professionals, you're leaders. If a 9-year-old can make the wave, how do you connect with everybody else that's sitting in a silo that truly wants business to operate from the inside out with humanity there? How do we make a wave where that's just the way it's going to be? So I think what you're called upon to do is to be inspirational leaders as opposed to just the experts. And no matter what, I would not allow you, if you're going to be a silo, to be the goalkeeping silo. We prevent irresponsibility. Think of trust for a second. You get called upon to rebuild trust when it's been broken. You could use trust to forge greater connections with society in a world where deep connections allow you to win. You could go on offense, and that's where I would go.
Interesting. Questions? I do have another if...
There's got to be questions. Or not.
Possibly not. Yeah, right here. Do we have... Oh, wait, Debbie? Oh, thanks. It's a race.
I just had a question about when you talk about giving trust away. I think that's a very important point. But we live in a culture, as your statistics illustrate, that giving trust away is very difficult. Do you have any suggestions for how one might overcome those barriers?
You say in your context, first of all, you experiment. You say in your context, do we really need 3 signatures? What would happen if in this division we did it with none and we saw what happened? And I bet you could start to do it and people get more comfortable. You know that when you say you're sorry, anybody can do that. That's giving trust away. You're giving someone the power to use that apology against you. They could go off and say, so-and-so just said they're sorry to me. That must be their way of saying they really misbehaved. All these ways add up. But I'm telling you right now, the world of inspecting for trust is breaking down. We've had executives go into online compliance modules to learn which countries prosecute you personally for fraud, and they picked to do fraud in countries that weren't those countries. And this is a defense industry company that's inspecting for who they can trust every single day. So the approach to inspecting for trust isn't working. The donut guy innovated. He said, in my context, here's how I would give trust away. If you told me something about your context, I might say, have you thought of doing it this way and that way and see what happens? And then you create a positive wave in that direction. In my own company, for example, we have 300 colleagues, some in India, some in Germany, all over the world. People rate themselves. They give themselves, they go out to 20 people, and they get feedback from 20 people through a questionnaire that looks at how they do what they do and how they get done what they get done and how much they get done, the whole thing. And then they give themselves a score, and we pay bonuses based on self-ratings with only one catch. They have to publish it publicly. And we're getting an incredibly meaningful, so they don't spend an entire year at our company saying, there's one supervisor I got to make happy. I'm going to lean in and contribute, and I will rate myself, and this company will trust me with money based on how I rated myself. Works for us, might not work for you. The idea is to innovate.
Let me jump on top of that. We've got another one back there. Sorry. Is that Gil?
Yes. Hi. Hi, Gil Friend from Natural Logic. Dov, thank you so much for bringing heart and truth into this conversation. I have 2 questions. First, in your measure of the maturity of the companies, in the global study that you did you find uniformity or did you find significant differences either by country, by industrial sector, by maturity of the company?
Sure. It's shocking. CFOs all agreed, and they all agreed around financial performance, and they know the financial performance. Small, large companies, because small family businesses can do this organically. This is a problem anytime you try to scale, right? Because I've talked about values a lot. I should say that there are two types of values. There are situational values. Do what the situation allows. If I could sell you a mortgage in California and never see you again because it's going to wind up with 1,000 others and crater the Icelandic pension fund, because I can, I will. So we've scaled up rules because rules are about what we can and can't do, or what Supreme Court Justice Potter Stewart said, there's a difference between doing that which you have a right to do and that which is right to do. We've scaled what you have a right to do and what you can't do. The other values are sustainable values that sustain human relationships: truth, honesty, integrity, trust, respect. We just haven't done those at scale. So we have rules in company cafeterias that say don't leave your food in the microwave, so people leave the food on the counter. But if we said let's just respect common places, we start to see these behaviors. So what we're seeing, small, medium, and large, is everybody has been in the habit of scaling situational values. So we're seeing this in large and small, public, non-public, for-profit, non-for-profit. Yeah, non-for-profit have a little higher mission orientation score, but they're getting the same kind of schizophrenic behavior. But the most striking was that this was in 18 countries. It was roughly the same. 18 countries.
Thank you.
Others?
Oh
yeah, Gil. I'm sorry.
Just quickly, Dov, the second
question.
Will you make these slides available?
I will put something together for this audience, including maybe more statistics, so that it works in that way. Happy
Great.
to.
Thank you so much.
Great.
I'll add something that I think would be better than that with some of these slides.
Talk about giving it away.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
What? I said talk about giving it away.
Happy to.
We've got time for one more question. Yeah, over here.
First, I congratulate you. You had quite an impressive lecture without a single note. Recently, one of the points you made was that if someone lower down in the pecking order notices something wrong, they won't bring it up because the access to the person who could make a difference is non-existent or almost impossible to navigate, which seems to be getting into the whole area of bureaucracy, which isn't just limited to, what can I say, the State Department or the UN, but it exists in most organizations. I've observed it quite a bit in hospitals where the stultifying effect of your bureaucracy is that if somebody needs a blood transfusion, but it needs to go through a certain pecking order, the person can die. I had personally once to go down and get the blood myself for a relative, and that was breaking all the rules. So how do you deal with rigid, stultifying, creativity-destroying bureaucracies, which you run into in almost every organization? Because it is that which would prevent the person at the lower level who sees something wrong from transmitting it.
So that's a very important question. Look, we call things bureaucracies. Sometimes they're bureaucratic. Sometimes it's just the structure, the governance. People need to be governed. You need governance. The governance we've chosen over the years was a decent form of governance for an industrial age when we wanted to scale up industry. It's not working in the human age. I don't really criticize the past. I'm saying in the interdependent human world, we can't govern people from without only. Carrots and sticks, we're going to have to do it from within. If I had to frame for you everything that I think is going on in the world, at the national, international, government, for-profit, non-profit, I'd say the following. It's about freedom. Occupy Wall Street and Tahrir Square at some level are about freedom. But there's two types of freedom. There's freedom from dictators, oppressors, being in a box in a vertical corporate hierarchy, freedom from a micromanaging boss. The world is seeing the unprecedented creation of freedom from. And how do you create freedom from? You tear things down. You could do it through a revolution. You could do it through deconstruction of the old corporation, getting rid of approvals, flattening hierarchy. But the tradition that we admire is not just freedom from, it's freedom to pursue happiness. freedom to innovate, to collaborate, to go to the moon. Freedom to has always required shared values, principles, and norms, and a certain type of leadership rooted in morality. And I think what's happening is when we create freedom from, we celebrate, yippee, we're done, free. Now the work has just begun, as we're seeing in the Middle East. Freedom from just creates the vacuum. And you have to really rethink this. Who here believes, and I'm going to wrap up, who here believes in empowerment? Guys, I'm against empowerment. I'm for the spirit of empowerment, why we want to empower. But when you empower, you're saying, guess what? I've got the power, I'm just a nice guy, I'm going to give you some, and I'm going to remind you that it's about power. Let's go beyond empowerment and go towards responsibility and values and find a way to create a culture where it's not about who's got the power to decide, you or me. Let's bring people together to make the right decision. And that's what this focus on how is all about.
Ladies and gentlemen, please help me in thanking Dov Seidman.